Welcome back to Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer. In this episode, we're going to cover 5 signs that your brand needs a repositioning. Tom and I got so in detail over this topic that we actually split this episode into 2 episodes. So this is part 1, and once you're done with this, head on over to part 2 to continue listening to the conversation.
You're listening to Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer, with hosts Tom and Kate. Your survival guide begins now.
Welcome back to Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer. I'm Kate Peters.
And I'm Tom Gallego.
I'm feeling really good about this episode because Tom and I have been chatting off recording for a while, and I'm like, the energy is high, and I feel like the passion is high.
I think you're right.
And I feel like we're going to get in a fight.
That's always good for the audience.
Yeah.
When Kate and Tom get in a fight.
Yeah. We're talking about Tom's favorite subject today, and one that we've literally already been debating about, which we've also had a lot of conversations about recently with just in our team and our clients and anyone that's come to us recently. And that's all about brand. So the first debate that Tom and I got into was, is this episode about brand rebranding or rebrand positioning? And you might think they're the same, but they're not. And Tom's going to tell you why.
Yeah, and I just call it positioning. Rebranding is a scary term for most marketers, and it's a traumatic experience and something we probably want to be very careful with, right?
Yeah.
Now, if your brand has developed a certain positioning that you don't like, or maybe it has no positioning, we've seen that too, or it's very weak, things need to be addressed. They need to be talked about. They need to be strategized, and a foundation needs to be put up. The visual brand identity needs to support the positioning.
Which is the one thing that I feel like people think about when they think about brand is the visual aspects. Like, I don't think there's aspects of brand that people realize are part of branding.
Yeah.
Like, you think, oh, brand, you think it's like, what does it look like? What is the logo? What are the colors? What is it like visually? How is it shown? But it's like, that's such a small piece of the pie.
Yeah. Like the T&K double bar brand on your steer, right? That's roaming across the...
I don't know what any of those words
Yeah,
mean.
that's Tom and Kate. Or it's our ranch.
Oh, that's
and you
T&K.
get a steer.
That's
yeah, you get the steer roaming across. That's actually a visual brand, right?
What's a steer?
It's a cow.
Oh, okay. So we're Western now?
But you're talking about the visual identity, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
the basis of... That's where a brand usually starts, right?
Yeah.
With the
We don't
visual
really have a
identity.
visual identity for this podcast. We should do like a photo shoot and like really lean into like a visual aspect. Maybe on a ranch.
You're saying we should develop our own brand and our own positioning for the Tom and Kate podcast.
Yeah, sure am.
Adapt and Thrive.
Yeah.
Right?
We'll tackle that another day.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of elements that go into brand. So let's chat about that first, because I think that's important to understand before we get into anything else.
Yeah.
So like you said, visual brand identity,
Right.
brand positioning is your favorite one.
Tagline. Right? It all supports, it all kind of works together in a system. Right?
Yep. The positioning is probably, would you say the positioning is the most important element?
Well, positioning is a byproduct of how you feel about a brand, right? So everything has to, I don't know if there is a most important. I would say they're all important, because branding is so key today, so critically important, more so than it's ever been, right? And the reason for that is because back in the day, when I first got into the business of advertising and fell in love with branding, any one category might have 3, 4 competitors, 5. Now you have 40, 50, 60 competitors. So how does the consumer differentiate between all these competitors? It's they look at a brand and they go, how does it make me feel? And that's the positioning, because you love Subaru, and I know why you love Subaru. It's the positioning of Subaru that's worked. They've worked really hard to get that positioning.
You know what it is? I feel like as human beings, this is probably a bad thing. I feel like we have our own brand. Like I have a brand as a human being.
Yes, a personal brand.
I remember this is a side story. When I'm from East Coast, when I moved to California, I went to a party in LA when I was like 26, and I met this group of people, and they were talking to me, and this one guy was like, so like, what's your brand? And I was like, what? And he was like, what's your brand? Like, who are you? Like, what's your vibe? What do you do? Like, tell me about your brand. And I was so taken back because I was like, first of all, that's the most LA thing I've ever been asked.
Totally. And it's totally a pickup line too. Think about that.
I don't think he was interested in women, and he was very nice.
Okay.
But yeah, and he had a brand. Like he was very, like he had his style was like very specific. Like I could tell his personality. Like he was very, like he had a brand. And I'm like this like little East Coaster with like no brands. And so I'm like, oh my God, I need a brand.
You need a brand.
So yeah, I feel like we all have brands as humans. And when we shop, we look for things that support that. And that's a weird concept, but it's true. So when I needed a car, I bought my Subaru like 3 years ago. I don't know anything about cars. I've never bought a car in my entire life. I like was driving my dad's car from like the 90s when I bought this Subaru.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted a Subaru because I don't know anything about cars, but I know that I like the vibe.
You like the vibe.
I like the vibe because
So
I
let me
like
ask
hiking
you-
and I have a dog and
Well, don't go there yet because, and we're going to get to Seth in a minute, who's standing in the wings. But you chose Subaru.
Yes.
And I know this. So audience know this about Kate. She is passionate about Subaru. So already you can tell, like, it would be a complete disconnect if you did not like dogs.
yes.
You love dogs.
You can't
love
not
dogs.
like dogs and own a Subaru.
Exactly. You love camping.
I love camping.
You love the outdoors.
Yeah.
You love the individualism that the Subaru affords you. It says, look, that girl's going to go drive off into the mountains and
Yeah.
she's going to
like my
have fun.
Subaru deserves a rooftop tent. Like it needs
Yeah.
to be accessorized to match the
Right.
rest of my brand. Yeah.
Right. And you have the most outdoorsy of all Subarus. It's kind of this kind of woodsy green, right?
I think it's like a navy, but I have the Forester, which is like one of the best ones.
Okay, maybe that's where I get the green.
Yeah.
Forester.
I sure love her.
All right.
I mean, I just had to buy 4 new tires for her this weekend. So
Right.
treat her right.
So Seth over here, he's passionate about Sony equipment.
Seth's
all this-
our video content creator, skilled video guy standing in the wing.
And he says he claims that he doesn't want to learn any other equipment, but that's not it. He loves Sony.
Why
Sony's
do
a
you-
good.
Do you want him to tell us why?
Sure.
All right, wait, come here, Seth. Take my mic.
I have to take your mic.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I love Sony. I'm a Sony fanboy. My friends say it very well. It's Sony or baloney. It's just the best. It's the best run and gun system that you can get.
Would you ever use a different camera?
Yeah, I would probably switch to like a Red or like Ari, but Canon, it's not doing it for me. Panasonic, Nikon, none of those. It's not gonna happen.
All right,
Yeah,
you heard
good
it here
enough.
first. He's a Sony guy.
And when people say they don't, that brand doesn't affect them, it's normally just the opposite. As I had a client once, and we're talking about brand, and she goes, "Yeah, I could care less about brands. They don't affect me." And I looked down, and she's carrying a Prada purse, and I said, "Can I ask you what kind of purse that is?" And she tells me, and I said, "Can you put it on the table? What is it about that purse you like?" She went off for the next 15 minutes telling me how cool this purse is and where she got it and how much she spent on it. And
Yeah.
and I looked at her like, "Really? So you're not passionate about any brands? You don't like brands?" And she like stopped herself and was kind of like chuckled
no.
and kind of laughed. So, you may not think brands affect you, but when you get right down to it, they do.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, it's so much so that you don't even realize it's affecting you. My favorite story in branding is the story of Ellie Vest, which
Yeah.
Ellie Vest we've talked about before is an app for female investors. So they basically made an app that specifically helps women learn how to invest and obviously provide a platform for investing. So when they entered the market, obviously there are other things that women can do to invest. There's other platforms that they can use. So it was a relatively saturated market, but they had seen that other companies had tried to do it where they specifically targeted females and they failed because they thought branding was, oh, let's just like make some advertisement and put pink on them, or let's replace the male models with female models in our ads, or put up a couple flashy words that would speak to females. And it just didn't work because women just kind of saw right through it. They're like, okay, great. Like you're trying to just target women. Like, I don't really care.
It's disingenuous. It's not,
Exactly.
and it's not supporting their positioning if they have one. So you need to be genuine. You need to be true to your positioning, Elvest was all in
Yes.
on females.
And so what do you have to do when you start a new brand? You have to know exactly who your target demo is. So what they did is that, and their founder, Sally Krawcheck, she was told over and over again, like, women don't want to invest. They don't want to invest. They're afraid. They're fearful. Like their husbands will do it for them. They're risk adverse. So she knew that. So instead of like shying away from that, she leaned into it. So instead of making the mindset of like, you should do this because it's so great, it was, you should do this because look how bad it will be if you don't. So they made their whole brand around like the bad things that could happen from not investing. Like, look at the wage pay gap that we have. Look at the at the divorce rate. Look at like all of these factors that would leave you on your own if you didn't financially, set yourself up for success. So they leaned into that kind of like, I don't want to say fear tactic, but they knew that women were risk adverse. So they leaned into the bigger risk being not investing. Mm-hmm. And that worked really well for them. They've been in business for 8 years. They're a $153 million company. They have 350,000 Instagram followers. Like, they are incredibly successful.
And they honored one of the 22 immutable laws of branding, one of the most important one. Well, they're all important, all 22. But it goes something like this, marketers out there. A brand, the strength of a brand, the power of a brand is inversely proportional to its scope. So their scope is narrow.
Very narrow.
It's women. It's young women.
Young women too. Yeah. Women in their like 20s and 30s.
Yeah, which, why would you do something like that? Well, she built a powerful brand because she intuitively knew that the power of Elvest was dependent on its scope and how narrow that scope is. So when I talk to clients sometimes and they go, I want to appeal to everybody. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a good strategy if you're going to build a powerful brand. Mm-hmm. Right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Would you suggest start in a niche, because you can always branch out. Don't try to appeal to everyone.
Well, you just described breaking one of the other 22 immutable laws of branding, and that is a brand extension. By and large, they're 100% failures.
Yeah, you hate brand extensions.
Hate them.
Yeah.
Hate them. So I would say, instead of extending the brand, like starting narrow and then going, okay, we want now a investment platform for men who are nearing retirement age. Mm-hmm. Don't try and adapt Elvest, because you're just gonna poison or really disrupt their positioning. What you want to do is create. It sounds hard and it sounds difficult, but you're going to be much better off if you create a new brand that's specifically for men, right? Mm-hmm. And the visual identity, the positioning, all of the tools around it, all of the voice of it is going to support men. So it's a different branding exercise, and it's a different company.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's almost like you could just start like a separate company that has similar offerings, but a different target.
That's what you would do.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about with Elvest that I also love about them, and this is probably more in the brand positioning part of it, is that they decided they wanted to be a mission-driven company. So if you look on their social media, it's like they know they can't lead with like, you should go with our product because we've got this, and this, because there's a dozen other products that have those exact same features, right? Like, you can't just have a product these days and not expect to have at least 12 competitors that are offering the same thing. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but they leaned into the emotional aspect of their brand. So they position themselves as female activists. So in their social media, they don't just say like, you should try our investing app because we'll give you 5% back on these specific stocks. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but that's a very like tangible type of offering.
It's a very salesy kind of approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Or like here, like I know we have people come to us all the time looking for agency help, and they'll say, well, our product offers this, this, and this. And we're like, okay, but like, what is someone going to like, how are they going to feel about your product? Like, other people offer those things. Like, that's great. Right. Those are the baselines. You have to have that to have a product, but like, how are people feel? Like, what are they going to think about when they think about your brand? And more often than not, they can't tell us. They don't know. So with Elvest, for example, they are female activists. So their content covers on their social media, which, like I mentioned, they have 350,000 followers. They talk about reproductive rights. They talk about maternity leave. They recently talked about Black women's equal pay day. So they're very much leaning into the side of like, we are for women, made by women, but not just finance. Like, we're not just going to pigeonhole ourselves into what our product offers. We're also going to be able to offer all of this content and resources and be a voice in the space. And I think that that's why they're so successful. Like, this is one of my favorite brands because I think that they've done such a good job versus their competitors. When they wanted females, they just slapped pink on their ads and you forget about them. So it's really powerful.
Well, so what you're talking about too is, so after brand, once the brand is established and the company and the positioning and it's all supporting, that brand, the next step is marketing. And in the book, Adapt and Die, right? That's free on our website.
Written by Tom Geiger.
Yeah. And the team, actually.
Prestige author.
One of the most important aspects in marketing is and you just outlined it, is know your audience.
Know your audience.
Know your audience. And Elvest knows their audience. So that's what they're doing. They're playing to their audience and really supporting the beliefs and the inner workings of that audience. So that's a classic marketing strategy. So it looks like they're doing a lot of good things.
They're doing good. I mean, imagine if Elvest went to an agency and said, we're an investing app for women. And they're like, great. A third of your content should be about political issues with women. Yeah. They'd be like, wait, what? But that's what they did. And it worked so well for them. And now they have such a loyal audience because it's emotional. All of these topics, So
you generally are going to get good ideas and good strategy from agencies.
Sure.
The old.
And if you're looking for one, check out L7Creative.com. The old, open for business.
Well, the old knock on always been the knock on agencies. And this is why startups have so much problem with agencies. Is we it's always been said, quote unquote, we make things too difficult. But no, it's we're just figuring we're figuring shit out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we challenge you.
Right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Adapt and Thrive, a survival guide for the modern marketer. If you liked what you've heard, subscribe and drop a comment on what topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Good luck out there, marketers. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to part 1. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, head over to the second part of it in our next episode.